Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth and the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case, the captives. I have been a prisoner in this camp for more than 1 year. Many of us have died, mostly at the hands of our captors, but some from disease and trauma. Somehow I have survived, but it hasn't been easy. They beat us mercilessly today with leather straps. At least 4 men surrounded us and whipped us. They yelled at us, "Move, you stinking beasts!" They made us run into a wooden structure, then locked us in. I was afraid they would light the structure on fire with us locked inside. But whipping is not the worst. One of the men used a red-hot iron on one of us. I will never forget the screams of agony from that poor chap. It left him with horrible burns. He died soon after. I would estimate there are about 100 of us in this part of the camp. There is a big turnover, with new inmates showing up daily. About every 5 days, about 10 inmates disappear, and 10 new ones are brought in. We are given very simple food to eat, usually either a slurry of corn or a bucket of fetid mush. The captors often walk back and forth laughing at us as we try to eat. Most of the time we have to squeeze our heads through the bars on our cells in order to get to the food. The beatings and torture are bad, but there is something worse. Several female inmates came into the camp pregnant. When they gave birth, the men in charge immediately took the little one away, not even giving the mother a chance to see or bond with it. I can't think of anything more cruel. A few days ago, they came into our barracks and grabbed 4 unfortunate inmates. They used handheld electrified clubs and drove these 4 chaps out and into a separate building. We heard them screaming. But soon after that, there were 4 loud thuds, and then there was silence. One of our informants claims he witnessed the goings-on in there. He said he saw our compatriots hanging upside down by their legs, with their throats slit from one ear to the other. When word of this spread through the camp, there was a palpable wave of horror and panic. Detailing all the brutality and torture we have experienced seems like wasted energy. No one listens to us. There doesn't seem to be any end to this existence or hope for the future. Many of the inmates show signs of depression and severe anxiety. One inmate had been very quiet, but suddenly threw himself against the electrified fence, dying right there. The captors left him standing in his death, leaning against the fence with the full current flowing through his body, his legs twitching and spasming. We suspected that leaving him there was a message to us, not to disobey or try to escape, or that same type of destiny awaited us. Yesterday morning, a very important man visited the camp. We knew he was important because of the way he was dressed. Most of the workers in the camp wear casual clothes or military-style tactical outfits. This fellow was decked out in a 3-piece suit and had a leather overcoat slung loosely about his shoulders. He carried some type of cane or stick. A rumor spread quietly amongst the gathered that this man might be the one they call the Angel of Death. He had us line up for inspection. Any inmates not accurately in line met with an electrified club, ensuring obedience. While we were at attention, he strolled up and down the row, pointing his cane at a few of the inmates he favored. His assistant wrote down the chosen inmate's number, and once he left, those selected were taken away and led into the back of a large truck, never to be seen again. I sometimes stand quietly outside the barracks, and I can see life way off in the distance. There is a park not far from here, One can see people walking their dogs, picnicking or bicycling happily. I can even hear the laughter of children as they run through the park with their parents chasing after them. How beautiful, I think, would it be to stroll in a park, saunter down to a babbling brook up in the hills, or eat peacefully without the fear of violence. I know it's just a matter of a brief time until my life comes to an end. I've lived this nightmare existence longer than I expected. When I first arrived, other inmates told me I probably wouldn't last a month. But I have seen many come and go, to a fate unknown. It would be all too easy to give up all hope. But when all seems lost, one still has the right to dream. That is something they can never take away from us. My dream is to live long enough to see an end to this incarceration and torture, and perhaps even get home to my family, if they still exist. There doesn't seem to be any hope of escape. The camp is too cleverly constructed for that. In fact, in some inmates, there seems to be almost a sense of resignation and acceptance of their tragic existence. I believe they call that Stockholm Syndrome. Generally, our captors do not engage us in conversation or ask us anything. They usually just walk by as if we don't exist. When we moo, they don't seem to understand what we are saying. I suspect they would at least try to communicate with us if we were human beings rather than cows. But today, uncharacteristically, one of my captors stopped at my cage to chat with me. He was one of the youngest of the men and sounded sensitive and caring, as strange as that may seem. But what he said really confused me. He mentioned that he doesn't eat meat and that he doesn't agree with the use of animals for food. I really didn't understand what he meant by that. After all, what is meat? How to go back? 2 years ago, I stared into the eyes of a little dead girl. She was sprawled on some highway, deep in what used to be the Midwest, her dead, fermenting eyes staring past me, and up, up, up into the sun-bleached sky. They didn't leave many bodies behind when they left, didn't want to find skeletons when they came back, I assume. Her skin was dark and leathery. There was a hole growing in her cheek. Blue tendrils came twirling out of the rotted, bony mass with those little orange tips. I wished they were green. I missed the trees, the grass. The closest thing to nature are the dead bodies with the synthetic viruses, eating themselves towards the clouds. Puny fingernail scratches on deep blue skin. She might have been dead for 3 months, 6 at a stretch. The first thing I felt when I saw her was excitement. She was the closest thing I'd seen to another person in 6 years. My father's body had been more pristine, less infected by the now, a perfect conservation of the then. There was only the tight, red little hole in his temple, the pool of dark, sticky blood pooling around bits of his brain, staring at me like a sick, foaming, red-furred dog. His eyes were stained red by blood, and they sat uncomfortably in their sockets, dislodged by the force of a bullet tearing it all up behind them. He was smiling, a slash of red teeth, red eyes popping. I half expected them to flick towards me, half expected the revolver, still lying loosely in his palm, to fire a matching shot through my own temple. I was relieved when he killed himself, as I was when I saw the dark hole in that little girl's cheek. I took the gun, I took his shoes, I turned around, and I left. As I reached the crest of the yellow hill, I looked back at him, lying like roadkill on the highway, in the dead yellow grass, our truck lying upside down, smoking, a few feet away. I wiped blood from my forehead, and I pressed on, the sun belching like a toad-white bubble of heat that burst around me periodically. There was a similar gunshot in the little girl's calf that poked out from her purple nightgown. It was the nightgown that made me vomit. I heaved onto the tarmac. I heaved and I heaved. She was so young, the same age as me probably, when I left my father's corpse to rot in the fat white sun that turned the sky gray from its heat. It happened in the night, I thought, sitting on the tarmac, staring at the little dead girl. There were faint, sun-baked faint tire marks on the road. She had gone, I thought, so young. She died, seething with red-hot pain, alone in the inky night, not an inkling of who she once might have been. The sun was rising, the sky was losing her blue. The pile of vomit to my side would begin to cook soon, like a stinking goose egg in a frying pan. I stood up. I looked at her once more, a china doll, cracked up and fading in the sun. I turned my head back to the road, the tarmac melting into a black puddle on the horizon. It had been the last wink of winter that day. Or what would have been winter? My diary says so. March 3rd. It's almost definitely wrong. The last time I was really sure of the day, the month, the year, I was 9. The day the school caught fire and burned down. The village burned for a week. The school was first, a black plume into the purpley gray midday sky. The grass was already threadbare, yellow. The buildings were lazy, wooden shacks, standing crooked, haphazard, peeling rows like a pile of matches. It's difficult to build, gather materials, do anything at all when you swelter all day under a rock or in a shack waiting for the midnight hours. The village burned, and then Grandma picked up bleach on the exodus, and soon everybody was gone, my father on his way. That day, after seeing the dead girl, I had collected enough gas and food to wait out the summer in the caves. They were damp, dripping places if you went down far enough. It stank of rotted bodies, those who had starved or gone, but it was cool. It was dark. It was safer than third-degree burns and snarling tumors all summer long. I remember, I'd left it so late that I knew to stop driving and lie in the grass under the car. I usually passed out from the heat after an hour or so. When the sun was lower in the sky, orange and red, the sky green and pink, I poured water over myself, guzzled it through my cracked, bleeding lips. And then I drove, and I drove. I'd left it so late, so dangerously late, that towards the end of the journey they started appearing in the sky. Small black dots at first, but they got bigger. They're ships, full of, I don't know, probably scientists in gray coats, watching, waiting for everything to die so they could start again. They're nothing but black pebbles in the sunset to me, and they disappear in the safety of the night. Black pebbles, no windows, no movement, no noise. They've no exhaust fumes, no visible sign of life. They just float calmly in the sky, black beads, watching as Earth eats itself like a coyote starving in the desert, picking at its own ribcage for morsels of its fleshy stomach. A stomach long gone. That little dead girl was a premonition, I suppose. It had been a silent, dissociative half-decade of white, silent heat. Each year dripped onto my lips like the last of the water in the hip flask I dangle now, as I speak, above my head. I should have been gone for the caves days ago. I stand on the roof of a gas station. It's midday. The sky is clear and gray. The yellow-brown plains sprawl outwards, forever on all sides. The highway cuts a black line down the middle. There's the occasional lone ranger, a telephone post in the distance, the hollow carcass of a tree. It's silent. So silent. Silence as deafening as a Red Sea, crashing down on my shoulders and burrowing into my dry, blistered throat. There's blood leaking from the blisters in my cheeks. It starts to boil slowly, etching teary burns down my chin, down my neck. I don't feel it. I don't feel anything. I'm a pair of eyes. I forgot the cave long ago. I've been waiting for this day. The last day of winter, the last wink. I hold my arms outstretched. From somewhere far away, much bluer and greener, much louder. If I squint, I can feel them burn like an old photograph on the campfire. The sensation starts to feel like rain, cold and relieving. I bleached myself intentionally. I went to one of the rotted bodies deep in the caves. A man. In the torchlight, his eyes were milky and half-closed, his mouth slack. There was a bottle of something that had rolled away from his right hand. There were foamy remnants on his lips. He reminded me of my little brother, Jeffrey. Maybe if he had grown up in the green and blue world, then he would have looked like that. I kissed his forehead. I began to forget not long after. It was sweet. It was like falling slowly asleep. From this nightmare, this fucking nightmare, I hear myself scream from far away, in the blue and green. I start to turn away now, as my legs begin to give out on the roof of the gas station. I can feel nothing holding out his hand. The blistered now is a universe away. Just before I turn and walk down the hill, the rain pouring onto my neck, blurring my vision into a sweet, comfortable gray, expansive, eternal gray. I see that little dead girl lying on the highway, sprawled out on the scorched earth. I smile as I slip away. I smile at her red, unblinking eyes. The Bruja and the Brujo Clay was driving west on I-270 towards St. Louis. The radio was off. He was alone with his thoughts. His father had died 2 days ago, and he was on his way from Chicago to the services, trying to reconcile his feelings on the road. He loved his father, but the old man was very difficult at times. He didn't really view Clay as his son. He viewed him as his private property, to do with as he wished. It was always football practice, baseball games, wrestling meets, karate lessons, and more. Sometimes Clay just wanted to hang out with his friends and play some video games, but there was rarely much time for that. His father spent 22 years in the U.S. Marine Corps. The red light behind the gas gauge lit up. He meant to stop and fuel up an hour ago, but he was lost in thought. Now he was in the middle of nowhere, and who knew where the closest gas station might be? Hopefully something would come up soon. He stopped thinking about his father as this practical concern overrode all else until it was resolved. He saw an exit sign ahead, Snaretown Road. Some little burg out here in the sticks, but there was a faded blue sign showing the standard highway gas station symbol. He exhaled and took the exit. At the end of the off-ramp, he saw nothing but empty road running off to the left, but to his right, he could see what looked like a small village about a mile down the road. He turned in that direction. When he reached it, he realized that you couldn't really call it a village. It consisted of just 3 blocks of commercial space. Most locations were unoccupied, he noticed, with a small grid of houses just behind on either side of the road. There couldn't be more than a few hundred people living there in total. He saw the gas station up ahead on the right and pulled in. Fuck. The gas station was closed, yellow tape around all of the pumps. It looked like it had been closed for years. Why didn't they take that sign down on the highway exit? He didn't know if he could make it to the next gas station, wherever that was, with what was left in the tank. There was a convenience market attached to the gas station, and the lights were off inside. But the door opened, and 2 men came out. They were somewhere in their 50s, or maybe earlier 60s, and they were dressed alike in thick plaid shirts, denim jeans, and brown boots. They waved to Clay and approached his car with friendly smiles. Clay rolled down his window. "Hey there. What can we do you for?" Was there a nervous cast to their smiles? I just pulled off I-270 for gas, but it looks like I'm out of luck here. Do you know where I can find the closest station? The two men began responding at the same time, but then one deferred to the other. Yes, sir. You want to just turn right back around, the way you came, and if you continue west on the 270, you'll see an exit for, Williams Village Road, just a few miles down, and they've got a couple of stations there. Good luck to you now. They just stared at him awkwardly, and Clay thanked them and pulled out of the gas station back towards the highway, praying he could make it to Williams Village Road. The needle was right on E. He didn't remember the drive from the highway exit to that little village being so far, but he could not even see the interstate from where he was. He also didn't pass through any other towns or villages when he turned off onto Snaretown Road, but now he saw one up ahead. Just a little 3-block main street surrounded by some homes. When he arrived there, he saw the same vacant gas station with the yellow tape around the pumps, the place he just drove away from less than 5 minutes earlier. He tapped the brakes, and when he saw the two men standing there in their plaid shirts, he pulled in again and rolled down his window. The nervous smiles were gone. Now they just looked nervous, their faces somewhat ashen. The one who had provided the directions to Williams Village Road spoke up. Hey there, partner. Did you get turned around or something? He looked around. Clay had a very strange feeling in his gut. Not a good feeling. I don't think so. I headed right back down this road towards the highway. I don't know how it could have possibly happened. The two men looked at each other briefly. Well, there's a sneaky turnoff down there that basically loops you back around to here. I'm sure that's what probably happened. You wouldn't be the first. Tell you what, why don't you just make a right turn out of here and stay straight on this road until you reach the 270, and then you just hop on the westbound ramp. You'll be down there at Williams Village Road in no time. After a moment, he nervously added, Go on now. Good luck. He looked around, and Clay thanked him and followed the directions, which were entirely uncomplicated. Once again, he followed the road back to the interstate, and once again, he drove for a few minutes and arrived back in that same small town with the defunct old gas station. The two men in plaid shirts were still standing there by the pumps, staring in his direction. Clay tapped the brakes and pulled in. This time, he killed the engine and stepped out. Guys, what's going on here? They stared at each other with grave expressions for a moment, and the one who had done all the talking so far continued to do so. He crossed his arms over his chest and looked down at the pavement. Well, fella, I'm afraid we have some bad news for you. And you're not going to believe it when I tell it to you now. But eventually, I'm afraid you will know that it's all true. He paused and took a deep breath. Clay's heart started beating harder. The man pointed up to some low wooded hills just beyond the patchwork of homes that made up the little village. So, for as long as anyone around here can remember, there has been an old house up there in them woods that was home to an old woman and an old man. They came here from somewhere just outside of Mexico City many years ago. They lived way down in Chiapas before that. Old as they were, they lived on as other folks born. Well, after them lived long lives and passed away. The old woman and the old man just kept carrying on. They didn't come down to the village here often, but when they did come down, they always looked a little older. But somehow they were still carrying on. He paused and looked at his partner in plaid. Charlie, you want to take over here? You can probably tell it better than I can. The other man cleared his throat. Yeah, sure. So, as Marty was just saying, The old woman and the old man who lived in that old ramshackle house up there in the hills didn't come down here to the village too often. They didn't have to. Now, here's where you're gonna stop believing any of this. But it's true. They didn't have to come down here to the village because if they needed anything, they had a pair of twin gray wolves, and they would just send them down. Those two would get whatever they needed. They would just walk into a store, pull the items that were needed off the shelves, and then growl viciously at someone in the store, they didn't care who, until they packed up all those items and followed those wolves back to the old house up there in the hills. Charlie paused to gauge Clay's reaction to this. Normally, Clay would dismiss this sort of fairy tale stuff instantly, but his head was still spinning from what had just happened when he tried to drive back to the interstate, so he continued to listen, wondering where this was all going. Well, sometimes the old woman and the old man did come down to the village. When the weather was nice and when the 4th of July fireworks were in flight, they were sometimes seen walking slowly together, hand in hand. The locals who lived here for a while all called them the Bruja, her, and the Brujo, him. I don't know how that started. It's just what people called them. Maybe they introduced themselves that way at some time. Anyway, one long summer day many years ago, no one can say just how many, they came down into the village. They were walking slowly down this sidewalk right here when some drunk driver came off the interstate in a big old SUV looking for gas and more beer, and he swerved just enough to run the Bruja down. She was killed instantly, and the Brujo screamed in fury as the man exited his vehicle. Mere moments later, the twin wolves were there, and they had him surrounded, snarling with rage and snapping their teeth at him. The Brujo pointed down at the old woman, and without saying a word, the driver lifted her body and followed the old man back up to the old ramshackle house in the hills, the two wolves trailing behind. He paused there and raised his eyebrows, giving Clay a chance to ask any questions or express his disbelief. Clay just stared back at him, waiting to hear the rest of the tale. Charlie continued, "Well, that's when things changed around here for good. For starters, all of the usual deliveries that we received every week, food, gas, prescription drugs, retail products like clothing and shoes and such, just all stopped coming one day. That was the day that we woke up and found that drunk driver crucified by the side of the road just down there. He had a sign hung around his neck that read, 'Do not touch me,' and no one was brave enough to defy that warning. He stayed up there for almost a year, the crows picking the flesh off his bones. And then one day, there was a storm, and the crucifix was blown down. You can still see the remains of his bones in the tall grass over there. Anyway, after that, no one could leave. There were 188 people living here at that time. Any time that any one of us attempted to drive down towards the interstate and away from Snaretown Road, we ended up right back here, just like you did. Outsiders like you have turned up here over the years, and most of the time they were able to leave. But some, like you, found themselves unable to leave. No one knows why, but I assure you, it is real. You're with us now. I'm sure you seriously doubt all of this, but someday, you will be buried here." Marty nodded, and Charlie paused again, and this time, Clay was done listening to the story. He walked back to the car door. "Look, I don't know what kind of scam or joke you're trying to pull here, but I think I've heard enough. I'm leaving now." "See you soon," Marty said quietly and waved goodbye. He did not smile. About 5 minutes later, Clay pulled into the gas station again from the opposite direction. Marty and Charlie were still standing right where they were when he left. He put the car in park and rested his forehead on the steering wheel for a short time. Then he exited the vehicle. "All right, What the hell is going on here? Charlie just told you. Clay lifted his chin. Okay, well, if there are no supplies coming into town, how do you all survive? What do you eat? Charlie said, "Come with me," and walked back into the convenience market. It was mostly empty, with the exception of a few chairs and a fold-out table with a deck of cards on top. There was also a cold case, which was almost completely empty, and one of those large freezer chests that most people keep in their basement or garage. Charlie lifted the lid. It was empty. Every morning, me and Marty come down here at 8 o'clock and we check the case. Sometimes there's enough food for everyone. Sometimes there's only half that. On some days, there's just nothing at all. It's almost always frozen dinners and canned goods, but sometimes we find a bag of apples or oranges. And when someone here in town is sick, we will occasionally find a bag of prescription medications. Not always. One day there was a chainsaw, and that afternoon we got hit by a nasty tornado that knocked trees down all around. Knocked down some power lines too, but the power stayed on anyway. We lost our phone lines, cellular signal, and internet connections when it all started, but for some reason the lights have stayed on and the plumbing still works. We just can't reach the outside world. No one knows why, and no one is willing to speak with the Brujo about it. He almost never comes down to the village anymore. When he does, he is always flanked by those two gray wolves. Clay tried to process all of it. The initial instinct of his rational mind was to call bullshit on the whole thing. But he also knew what had just happened each time he attempted to leave the village. He needed air. He stepped outside and leaned against the fender of his car, parked by the dead gas pumps. Charlie and Marty stayed inside and spoke to one another for a little while, and then they walked out and rejoined Clay. "I'm sorry, partner. I didn't catch your name." Clay introduced himself. "Well, Clay, we have lost many of our older neighbors over the years, and not too many new ones have arrived to replace them. The last one before you was Jimmy Gillis from Kansas City, and that was over 4 years ago. As a result, we have quite a few unoccupied houses where we can set you up." Charlie looked at Marty and said, "I'm thinking Benny McCabe's place would do nicely. It's small, but he and his brother did a lot of remodeling work before it all started, and it's still in very good shape." Marty nodded. "Sure. Come on, Clay. It's just down the block here. You can leave your car there for now. It will be fine. Not that you'll ever need it again." Neither of the older men chuckled at this. It was not intended to be a joke. Clay was just trying to make sense of it all as he followed them down the block to the house. He definitely hadn't given up hope of leaving here as soon as possible, but he didn't have a plan. He needed time to think. The house would give him some time to do this on his own. Charlie and Marty showed Clay around the single-story, two-bedroom home. It was nice enough. And afterwards, they walked around the little village for a while and introduced him to some of his new neighbors. Everyone was nice, but everyone was also just off in one way or another. They all seemed a bit haunted, a bit broken, and that was right there on the surface. You couldn't miss it. Afterwards, Clay pulled his car down the block and parked it in front of his temporary new residence. He pulled his suitcase from the trunk and brought it inside. Marty came by with a frozen pizza and 2 cans of soda for his dinner. That night, lying in bed, Clay never even came close to finding sleep. He stared up into the darkness and contemplated his situation, his reality. The more he thought about it, the less he believed it. He was educated and not given to belief in the supernatural. This had to be some kind of trick or illusion. He couldn't understand the purpose, but he didn't want to find out too late that he had been trapped into some weird sacrificial cult or something like that. As the hours went by, he became more and more sure of his conviction that this was not real. He thought about the half-mad people he had met while walking the neighborhood with Charlie and Marty that evening. He had no desire to remain here another second. There had to be a way out. And this story about the Bruja and the Brujo, it was all just too much to accept. This was crazy. He had to be at his father's funeral. He had to get there somehow. He decided to leave. He got up and packed his things back into the suitcase and walked out to the front door. When he opened it, a pair of very large twin gray wolves sat there on the porch, perfectly still except for their yellow eyes. He recoiled instinctively and took a step back. The wolves let out a low growl simultaneously, but remained still. Clay slowly shut the front door to his new home and went back to bed. He would not be at his father's funeral. He knew that now. He wasn't going anywhere. Bob Barker and the price of cookies. If Bob Barker was dead, he apparently was making the most of it. Bev checked the date on the magazine, guessing this bundle of BLTNs had gathered dust on some post office loading dock until some chuckleheaded awoke from their civil service coma. November 2024. She angrily brushed the white hair from her eyes as the early November winds buffeted the mailbox bank, then located the mailing label that cheapened the high-tone, heavy matte cover. Bev's old stylist had been a pretentious little bee with a stack of thick, chic, hoity town and countries in the waiting area, hoping to attract a classier clientele to her shitty little dump of a shop next to the campus Domino's that smelled perpetually of pepperoni and perms. Upshot was, somebody was going to have to get their hot goss at the Gas End Gulp or the Great Clips like a normal peon this month. Thanks. Beverly L. Tryon, 107 Oakline Drive, Millington, Illinois. Bev blinked and re-examined the other two cover boys. She was pretty sure Jimmy Buffett had sailed off into the sunset not too far back. Her hairball X would have held a 3-day wake for the man if he hadn't already cracked his parrot head 3 Februaries back on his way from the VFW to the Moose after the last of the vets cut him off. The Legion already had turned off the spigot, and Lend canned the VA shrink halfway into intake, opting instead for his former wife's counsel to grow a set and just get over yourself. The third didn't ring a bell with Bev. Dimly familiar old black guy who sported at least a 5-pack, and who might have been handsome if, well, you know. Whoever he was jamming out on some unnaturally white beach with the purportedly late Price is Right host and the patron saint of every midlife mess who'd ever dropped the mortgage on a PT Cruiser. By the way, apparently not J.D. Power's top pick for surviving a collision with anything much larger than a pop-top. She read on. Come on down. The 3Bs rock their second anniversary with Rita's and Rhythm in Paradise. Bob Barker raises the curtain on his mega canine rescue and personal crusade against poverty, while Jimmy Buffett and Harry Belafonte share their greatest hit island recipes, including the greatest cheeseburger this side of paradise. Bev frowned as a dead maple cottonwood cyclone teased her varicose ankles. She didn't care for Bob's new tarnished silver mane, and the alto sax was certainly a new one on her. Buffett wailed on his Martin guitar, part of a treasury of parrot head trivia she'd inherited along with the deed to a charred cube of Cruiser. Belafonte she now recalled from the piece-of-shit Beetlejuice movie her daughter had dragged her to after the divorce. Only good part of the idiotic, blasphemous thing, though now she recalled that when he wasn't slapping the bongos, Harry was a major troublemaker, one of those. I thought he was dead. Bev heard her own cervical pop as she whipped irritably around to find 109 craning over her shoulder. Though she'd ascertained ownership, Bev hugged the slippery magazine protectively to her chest. If I could just... The maddeningly tall, old busybody next door mumbled as she attempted to reach around Bev's compact girth. Bev leapt back, and the amazing 6-foot woman scooped an impossible stack of catalogs and political flyers from inside her narrow Ace Hardware box. Bev suspected she was a libtard. She kept a patch of weeds and hay between their houses with a sign about how she was a friend of the butterflies. The city wouldn't do anything about it. Must be some kind of marketing campaign, 109 chirped, extracting her own sleek BLTN from the pile. What do you think that stands for? Probably like AARP, but I got that Saturday. Huh, addressed to me. Weird. Maybe the O people sold my name to a mailing list. Bev's jaw tightened. Her neighbor tapped her ET forefinger on the mailing label. See that in the corner? 1/7. 7 freebies to lure us in, then the sales pitch. God, I thought Belafonte was dead. You know, my mom actually met him during one of Dr. King's marches. I'm freezing my ass off. Later, Bev grunted, scuttling across the street, narrowly averting a Domino's driver who apparently thought 30 minutes or it's free was a personal code rather than a desperate marketing plea. The card floated to the olive shag as she slammed the front door shut against 109 and the others, those who'd wormed into the downtown fringe with their hippie gardens and rainbow flags and black Antifa Lives Matter and socialist blue yard signs as her neighbors cashed in one by one. Steadying herself on the doorframe, Bev bent painfully to scrape the cream-colored card from the filth and fibers. This subscription is a very special gift from Aileen. We hope you'll enjoy our thoughtfully curated articles, Bev snorted, and that truly BLTN enriches your understanding and perhaps even your life. With love, Aileen. Christ, Bev breathed, dropping into the threadbare Thomas recliner Len had neglected to include in the prenup. Aileen. There was a cousin Eileen on Dad's side, and 2 count 'em Ellens. One a little cunt on the Millington High cheer squad who'd made her senior year a nightmare. The other a bigger cunt of a cousin on Len's roster who she hadn't seen since her ex's 40th. Bev studied the 4x6, logo-embossed card. She realized the signature was handwritten. That itself seemed hinky. The magazine had slipped between cushion and arm, and Bev cursed as she worked it free and flipped open the stiff cover. Barker stood, arms crossed, in an improbably green field under an impossibly blue sky, surrounded by seemingly thousands of people each holding a dog. Every color and size, humans and canines, and breeds Bev had never seen in her 30-mile radius of a life, or that show with that scrawny little Mexican Cesar Milano whatever. All dogs go to heaven, but Bob Barker wants all transcendents to have a forever home too. See page 10. As Bev polished off her Marie Callender's meal to share Italiano meat lasagna with a dessert combo of Barker and Buffett, she was certain she'd been scammed on some elaborate and epic level. The old bait and switch, Len would have called it, probably. What was the phrase? Catfishing her for her Discovery card information, or Social Security. Bev's old pal, Wikipedia, had confirmed Barker had died in August 2023, 1 cent short of 100 of the Alzheimer's. Unless they'd discovered some miracle cure for dementia and rigor mortis, Bev suspected somebody with a computer had deep-faked up the entire photo spread like they had at the Capitol back in 2021. Buffett had nibbled his last sponge cake about a month after Barker'd cashed in, and Belafonte's ticker'd kicked out in April the same year. Bev read on, forsaking NCIS and then NCIS and so on, to peruse Kirstie Alley and Olivia Newton-John's favorite John Travolta films, Not What You'd Think. Latenu Hura Lady's new stage production of something called A Raisin in the Sun, and a selection of Tom Clancy's latest poetry. The new Harper Lee and Raymond Chandler novels were coming out, and Roger Ebert reviewed Robin Williams' upcoming comedy. Throughout were more references to transcendence, something called shepherding that appeared to be some kind of Big Brothers, Big Sisters deal for adults, and other weirdo jargon with a Scientology-type vibe. By 10:30, Bev had bypassed the crossword for a last-page nightcap called BLTN Bites. At first, she recognized none of the 8 mugshots lined up along the bottom of the inside back page, and she fumbled her Walgreens cheaters on to see just what this shit was all about. I'd sacrificed my creativity for what I thought were family responsibilities when I actually had surrendered what I loved for family expectations. Now, I sacrifice nothing. Tina H. Shepherding has opened the doors that kept me in darkness as a husband and father. Sergio F. As I help heal tortured and guilty souls, the cries of the camps finally have begun to fade. Gerhard W. I'd tried to treat my wartime nightmares with liquor and marriage, except I was only chasing poison with poison and a toxic relationship. Leonard T. Bev paused at that last, scrutinized the accompanying thumbnail, a beaming, tanned, mustached man who appeared to have lost a good 40 pounds and a network of broken capillaries. Len seemed to be smiling up at her, not in contempt but with an infuriatingly pitying joy. Bev frisbeed the magazine across the living room. The second edition was in the mailbox Friday, slumming with the Miles Kimball / Harriet Carter catalogs and Subway and Arby's coupons. Doris Day, Grace Kelly, Janet Leigh, and big-boobed Kim Novak adorned the cover this time, sharing a jumbo bucket of popcorn under a theater screen filled with a doughy, inscrutable face. "We too!" the blood-red headline screamed. Hitchcock's blondes talk Weinstein, micro and macro aggressions, and traps and tips for tomorrow's Hollywood 2BIs. Bev's faintly glaucomic eyes did a full loop as she wondered what in the fuck a 2B was, and she turned from the trio of mailboxes before glancing about the dead, gray block and sneaking a peek inside 109. Beef and cheese and teriyaki chicken, Harry and David and Land's End catalogs, and 109's own copy of BLTN. Bev started toward 108's box, but a chipper voice shattered the frigid November air, and she tasted copper. "We have to quit meeting like this," 109 murmured, with a theatrically arched eyebrow, towering entirely too closely. "Oh, it's here. I was hoping. This would have been perfect for Thursday chemo." The WNBA's eldest draft pick looked more Panera's or Whole Foods than Arby's or Subway, pale and knobby and the color of chicken skin. "Shoot, I was hoping maybe you'd want mine," Bev lied, waving the glossy magazine. "You don't like it?" Uzdokas gasped. "I find it so affirming. You know everybody in there's dead, right?" "Everybody," Bev echoed. "Sick. I mean, what's the deal? Is this some kind of, what do they call it, cyber scam?" They don't have a website, I checked, so not really cyber. And if this is a scam, it's an awful expensive one, don't you think? Did you notice there are no ads, no information about subscribing? How do they pay for this whole production? You know what I think maybe this is about? Second chances, better choices, leaving regrets behind. You know what performance art is, right? I think maybe this is like performance journalism. Bev remembered how good fucking Len looked, considering his past stint as 240 pounds of flame-broiled road chuck. "I think you're batshit crazy," she snapped, struggling across the street with her slippery bundle with as much dignity as she could attempt to muster. Back in the cost-efficient, 60-degree comfort of her living room, Bev ripped through the December BLTN, scanning the names and faces of the dead. Cronkite, Winehouse, Plath, Walters, Shakur, Bogart, Cobain, Dr. King, Mr. Spock, The famous dead Kennedys building homes with Eisenhower, Johnson, Nixon, and a lanky and badly styled goateed fellow who, if Mrs. Werschnig's fifth-grade history served her, had taken one in the balcony 40 and some odd more ago. This time, Bev snatched the card mid-flight, a gift from Aileen, just between us. Aileen. The tone was indefinable, the silence that followed arctic. Bev stumbled backward against the recliner's arm. Nat, do you know any Aileen? Wasn't there an aunt on your dad's side? You never listened. Bev's daughter sounded a decade older, though it had been a little less than 3 years since they'd last exchanged a spoken word. What? You never listened. You couldn't hear anything through your anger and hate. You wouldn't hear anything. God Natalie's voice broke into harsh, strained sobs. The hell are you babbling about? Bev snapped even as her fingers trembled around the smartphone. Of course, it was us too. We wouldn't hear it. Him. Her. Oh, fuck. We thought we were the victims. We were the ones in pain. But you. Fucking you. Bev was now holding the phone in both hands, perched on the Thomas's arm as if suspended over infinite space. I'm not sitting here while you fucking cuss me out. You called me, Nat shrieked, gasping and now laughing murderously. After all this time, you called me to remind me what a poisonous, soulless, hateful old cunt you are. Well, her daughter panted. Well, I guess better late than never. Right? Right? The phone slipped from Bev's arthritic fingers as she fell back into the cushion, veined legs kicking, folded and trapped on her back like a tortoise wearing its carapace beneath the skin. Nat's unearthly rage and madness crackled somewhere in the deep green pile below, a blaze her mother was powerless to extinguish. Just between us. Before the evil took hold of him, it was their little joke. One more thumbprint cookie, an extra slice of Kroger cake or Baker's Square French silk before Mom scooped him up for supper. A reminiscence or chuckle her woke daughter would never have tolerated. We'll keep this our little secret, just between us. When Aiden finally confided in Grandma, he'd turned it against her, and she wasn't going to be extorted by a spoiled, sick 13-year-old. After it all began, after Aiden began spewing insanity, his vile inner thoughts and whinings, after the wheedling and fits and the pervert libtard shrink, and the constant trips to Chicago, and the financial realizations that threatened Paula's college, and the public displays and declarations, and finally the family's exile from holidays and even communications, the cookies and cake and the secrets had halted. When Bev herself banned the boy from her home, spitting his adopted pronouns back in his face, he'd called blubbering from one of his freak friends' phones to keep her from immediately ghosting him. He was alone. Dad would no longer speak to him. Mom had told him he was a selfish brat who'd made them outcasts. Aunt Nina told Mom, on speaker no less, that she couldn't have the girls exposed to such depravity, and the church in which Nat, Paula, and Aiden all had been christened had written to revoke God's blessing on the deity's behalf. Grandma, just between us, I kind of feel more and more like just killing myself. Bev also had received a Dear John, Luke, Matthew, Mark from the Second Millington Church of Jesus, though not from quite so far up the chain and merely punching her ticket to Tuesday night prayer and gossip and the coveted holiday potluck chairmanship. It had been months since Nat had so much as dropped her a check-in text, and the atmosphere at the Catholics' Thursday public bingo had dropped 20 or 30 degrees since Aiden's, parentally, unauthorized interview on the local AM morning show. Well, Bev had reflected, calmly, tonelessly, better late than never. Oh, of course, she couldn't blame herself. Like the literal drama queen Aiden had become demanding his true self, he didn't have, nor, as Bev had quipped, any longer had the stones to face the humiliation he'd brought down on his family, on his grandma. She had nothing to torture herself over. That was on the man with the swastika and Jesus tattoos who'd unloaded 7 slugs into the creature who was once her little guy in a Peoria LGBTQ health center lot to the tune of Genesis 1:27. Number it was the betrayal. Bev raged as she thrashed ineffectually to free herself from this final posthumous revenge, the effort sending jolts of pain up her left arm. He'd broken their pact, the little bastard. Or bitch. Finally, a young feminine voice pierced the growing fog. Bev blinked up at a figure perhaps not as lovely as Aiden had been handsome, but somehow far stronger. Better late than never, I guess. Miss? She'd been halfway down 107's weedy walk when she turned beaming to the gaunt, middle-aged woman gripping the porch rail next door, as if she were awaiting the first life raft. The long, frail neighbor woman was smiling uncertainly back, apologetic concern in her deeply sunken eyes. "Hello," the girl greeted in a rather low but somehow comforting tone. Instead of holding her stance in annoyed indecision or briskly crossing the scrubby turf between them to expedite the encounter, the young woman continued down the walk and took the sidewalk to 109. On closer examination, she was what some might call homely, slender but big-boned, crisp blue eyes, set perhaps a centimeter too far apart for standard, conformist beauty. But she moved with what Kelly's own mother might have called bearing, a confidence in who and what she was, and that whatever that was just, well, right. The girl waited at the bottom of the steps, inviting, inquiring, neither expectant nor demanding. "I didn't mean to disrupt your day," Kelly said. "I thought I might have heard something from, Beverly's a minute ago, and I just wanted to know everything was all right." "It is," the young woman smiled brightly. "So you're not... I'd understood she had a grandson." She did. "And please don't be sorry. I was coming to see you next. You've received your complimentary BLTN, Mrs. Grambling?" Kelly's head tilted before the smile returned. "Well, yes, though I'd have to say I'm at a bit of a loss as to what exactly it is I'm reading. Full disclosure, I'm in no position for long-term subscriptions." The girl looked to the sky with a grin. "I guess, if I had to say, we're about second chances, better choices, leaving all regrets behind. Options. I'm kinda out of those." Kelly sighed. "Mrs. Grambling, do you have a minute to discuss options?" "I guess I have that. And please, Kelly." Aileen, R.E. The heat, death of the sun. Reality was having a Monday with a capital M. Never mind that it was Thursday. Or that Monday always began with a capitalized M. Or that both Mondays and Thursdays only existed on Earth. That was all beside the point. Ron liked that about Earth, though, the calendars. Really, humans had something special going on with them. They were great with organizational skills, and he appreciated that, given his role as manager of accounts payable. He was just one cog in the existence machine, but lately Ron felt he might be the only one to really give a hoot about the overall health of the industry. The atmosphere of the Division of Material Validity office was drab, sure, but he found his job of keeping existence running to be interesting. There were an infinite amount of vendors that manufactured the various components of reality, and he enjoyed his role of ensuring that those accounts all got paid for their hard work. Ron's day started off fine enough. His boss, Mike, prattled through the morning meeting with his usual ennui. before giving him a checklist of urgent tasks. Ron spent his pre-lunch hours ticking off boxes. Pay the universe's monthly time invoice to keep months a thing. Contact maintenance overdue space-time fabric repair on collapsing wormholes in Sector 12. B. Review discrepancy in inertia. Report on galactic planetary rotation. Forward any Earth RFPs titled, "Oh God, please save us," or similar to upper management. He got through the first two in record time, considering he paid time ahead of schedule, but the Monday-ish nature of the Thursday kicked into high gear as he scrolled through an inbox full of dismally titled RFPs. He'd always thought the DMV overpaid realities freelancers, so he was perplexed as to why there seemed to be so many slackers recently. Humans weren't the only ones having issues. The fluxers on Zemulus 237 were freaking out about Zemulus 237 suddenly rotating backwards, but given their sheer amount of messages, humans were definitely making the biggest fuss. He'd been scrolling for the past 15 minutes, and he still hadn't reached the end of this morning's RFPs to the Savior Department alone. Ron glanced across the aisle at Florence's cubicle and saw that she wore a similarly exasperated expression as she looked through them all. It would seem that endless earthen pleas to the heavens were clogging up everyone's inboxes. Ron, frankly, was at his wit's end. He dialed Mike's office phone extension. Why is Earth spewing out so many salvation proposals all of the sudden? Sun's getting too big and hot. They're having a rough go of things. Ron blinked and scrubbed at his forehead. That's odd. I paid Fusion's invoice. I know. They got upper-level orders to churn out more energy, though. Kicked it up yesterday. He sank back into his office chair and rolled his eyes to the ceiling. And upper management didn't communicate that with the rest of us because... Mike snorted. It was just a little tweak to Fusion's workload, not a big issue in the overall grand scheme of things. Ron sighed. Okay, thanks. Forwarding now. Yep. He set the phone back on the receiver and began forwarding messages up the chain of command, but paused at one rather offensive title. He read the message, feeling a bit nosy as he did so. From Alice Kincaid at Earth.universe.2. All at DMV.universe.subject. RFP. We're dying down here, asshole. Hey, God. CNN just announced we have about 6 months before we're cooked. The sun's getting hotter by the day. I can't go outside anymore. I thought we had like 1 billion-ish years left. At least, that's what the Science Museum exhibit said when I went as a kid. Scared the hell out of me. Always has. But 1 billion years is a damn long time. 6 months is absolutely not. I would love it if you could make the sun go back to normal. I haven't done everything I wanted to do yet. Please, it's too hot. It hurts. My skin is... Please. More sincerely than I've ever been about anything. Ever. Alice Kincaid. Scowling, Ron called Deity. The line rang for a few long moments, but he was pleasantly surprised when the CEO answered. Hello? Hi, D. How's it going? Hey, man. Same old. What's up? I just had a question about Salvation RFPS. Ron could hear Deity typing something as he responded blandly, Shoot. Are you guys doing anything about them? I've forwarded several to you and the board, but they just keep coming. I was going to mark them as spam and wanted to check if you're receiving them without me forwarding. Yeah, spam them. Got it. Ron considered whether it was professional to ask further questions, but his curiosity outweighed his propriety. Are you going to respond to them? Take any of Earth's projects on, I mean? Deity laughed in an offhand way. Nah, I'm phasing out the planet. Humans are too destructive. Tarsonis's Gebulons have their act together a lot better, so the board voted to sell off Earth and invest over there instead. It's a stabler market. He felt a hot stab of dismay at the news and swallowed thickly. Understandable, but can I say? He gave a little laugh. I mean, I know it's way above my pay grade, but... But? Ron chose his words carefully as he said, humans have been our top client for a few 100,000 years. They've had some centuries of poor performance every now and then, sure, but we've always kept an overall mutually beneficial relationship. It's unfortunate we're ending it on a bad note. Deity clicked his tongue. Speak more freely, Ron. I don't mind hearing your opinion. Ron huffed a chuckle. Don't write them off our books. I like what they put out. Would be a shame to not be able to get their stuff anymore. What sort of stuff? Ron thought for a moment. Well, I enjoy all the love stories. They've got some great food, too. I tried a sandwich once. Phenomenal. And I owe them a debt for coming up with calendars. Deity deliberated silently before replying. Gebulons just created a far superior timekeeping system, and it didn't take them almost 300,000 years to do it. Switch to using theirs. The market's moving on, Ron. Progress with it. I appreciate your input, though. Tell you what, I'll bring up your notes to the board at the next meeting. We may be able to work something out. Ron's shoulders relaxed. Thanks, Dee. Appreciate it. Yep. Have a good one. The line went dead. Ron turned his attention back to Alice's message, his cursor hovering over the Mark as Spam button. He decided to archive it instead. Ron brooded the entire commute home and concluded that he found the DMV's culture and overall philanthropic approach to be increasingly lackluster. Phasing out Earth was a bad move, plain and simple. He didn't understand the decision, even after hearing Deity's explanation. Gebulons had exited the primitive stage of existence far quicker than humans had. True, but their demeanor was overzealous. The DMV's mailroom was constantly overwhelmed with fanatic offerings, and their adoration always felt just a tad too desperate to be authentic. Humans showed their appreciation for reality in subtler ways. They were intentional with it, more honest. A message of gratitude at receiving a tight embrace from a missed loved one. A whispered, "I owe you" when swimming through crystal water. A salute when a sore knot is worked out of a long, aching muscle. Deity was a great guy, a fantastic CEO, but he had a distinct flair for the dramatic that often left Ron dealing with a nightmare at the office. For instance, around 6,000 years ago, Deity hedged a bet that chemistry wouldn't be able to synthesize enough water for Q3 on their current budget, so he'd ordered Ron to increase their payment. Mike had warned the CEO that doing so would generate far more water than could be tolerated by planets with life forms. But Deity had simply responded that those life forms were underperforming. He'd ordered that a handful of profitable creatures be retained for improved reproduction, and the task fell to Ron to proceed with the higher payment. To this day, Ron felt terrible about flooding every planet across 4 galaxies. He settled into his nightly routine, but he couldn't get Alice's message out of his mind. He pulled up the archived message as he ate his supper. After a stiff drink, he forwarded the correspondence to his personal account, then forwarded it to Alice again with an attached reply. From Ron at personal.universe.2, Alice Kincaid at earth.universe.subject. FW. FW. RFP. We're dying down here, asshole. Hello, Alice. Strictly speaking, it goes against protocol for me to send this message, and you are the first life form to receive such a communication from me. so my apologies for any disruption to your evening. Admittedly, I'm unsure how this message might be received by a human. The purpose of this correspondence is to extend my sincere condolences for your current situation and assure you that your concerns regarding your imminent demise will be thoroughly discussed at the next meeting of our board. Please note, however, that this does not guarantee immediate action. We appreciate your patience during this time. All the best, Ron. Manager, Accounts Payable, Division of Material Validity. Ron sipped on his second drink, feeling a bit more at ease with the situation. His satisfaction dissipated when she returned a response in seconds. From Alice Kincaid at Earth. Universe. 2. Ron at Personal. Universe. Subject: indistinct shriek of terror. I apologize, but I need Japanese text to perform the conversion as requested. If you'd like me to demonstrate this capability, please provide Japanese text that includes kanji characters, and I'll convert it according to the guidelines. Ron set down his glass and frowned as he replied. From Ron at Personal.Universe. 2. Alice Kincaid at Earth. Universe. Subject: indistinct shriek of terror. Hello, Alice. Your quick response is appreciated, but I am confused as to your meaning. Best, Ron. Alice's reply was instantaneous. From Alice Kincaid at Earth.Universe. 2. Ron at Personal.Universe. Subject: indistinct shriek of terror. Get out of my head. Get out. Get out. Are you reading a bloody email? God, it hurts. It hurts. Ron winced, pulled out his phone, and found Alice's alternate contact in the DMV database. He dialed the number for a video call. The image of a hyperventilating woman curled into the fetal position on a dirty floor appeared on the screen. She was covered in patches of charred skin, and her hair was matted with blood in some places. Ah, hello. This is Ron. Please forgive me for calling you at this hour, and for the pain you experienced receiving my initial messages. I wasn't aware my previous form of communication would be painful for a human. She let out a shriek upon seeing him appear in what looked to be her kitchen. Her hands tore at her hair as she mumbled incoherently. Are you all right? It wasn't my intention to startle you. Alice shot to her feet and tugged a large chopping knife from its holder, brandishing it in his face. What are you? Ron's brow furrowed. He'd always assumed humans would recognize a DMV agent, considering all the mail they sent. As I said in my earlier message, I'm the... What the hell? Manager of Accounts Payable at the DMV, he continued as she panted a string of vile curses. I read your RFP meant for the Savior Department, and I felt just awful about what's happening to your son. I thought I'd give you an update personally, maybe alleviate your fears a bit. Her subsequent screech was nearly unintelligible, but Ron deduced through the wailed expletives that she was confused about the nature of the DMV. Please, miss, calm yourself. I'm not technically in the room with you. Alice's eyes bulged, but she stilled, and the knife clattered against the tile floor. The division is quite hard to explain to a life form on your plane of existence, but the short answer is that we manage and regulate that plane. She jabbed a finger in his direction. So you're the one responsible for making the sun about to explode? Ron's teeth tugged at his bottom lip. It's a bit more complicated than that. He lost the battle against his better judgment, and gave the terrified woman a simplified explanation of Deity's decision. When he finished, she sank to the floor in a heap and put her filthy head in her hands. "It will be all right. The board will..." Alice breathed a raw laugh. Ron looked at her with concern as the sound grew in broken intensity. "Miss..." "Angels," she choked out between gasping fits of laughter. "And God and reality itself are all just a bunch of corporate goons, and I'm nothing more than an underwhelming employee, and..." Her laughter morphed into weeping. "Oh, that is cruel." She was an underwhelming client, technically, but Ron didn't correct her. "Is there anything more I can do to help you at the moment?" He cringed at the utter devastation on the woman's face as she turned to nod at him. She was silent for a long moment, staring blankly at the heat-yellowed paint of the wall, before she muttered, "Take me back to that museum all those years ago, so I can tell my 10-year-old self to write a lot of books, to read a lot more of them, to learn the guitar, to become a rock star like I always wanted, or maybe an author." Her voice broke as she slowly stood back up. "To hurry up and find the love of my life, because I've spent it entirely alone, to quit my soul-sucking office job, or to not even take it in the first place, to hug my mom long and hard every chance I get, to tell my dad I forgive him, to make peace right then and there with how insignificant I am, because I am." Ron ground his teeth at the volume of her final sentence, shocked at how viscerally uncomfortable the word insignificant made him feel. "I'll be sure to speak to Deity tomorrow at..." Alice threw the knife with all her strength at his projection, ending the call. "I'm sorry, Ron. I am. But there's nothing I can do. We don't undo what's already been done." Chris, the head honcho over at Time, was being irksomely dense. Ron grumbled, gesticulating at the big machine before them. "I know that. Nothing needs to be undone, just done over again. Run Earth's clock backward a bit, only 20 years. Come on, I'll owe you one. Memories on board. They already primed the woman. We're just waiting on you." Chris ran a hand through his silvering hair. "Deity approved this?" "Not, as such." "Sure did. For one human woman? Consider it an experiment. You've ran back time before, for far duller reasons. I don't know if I'd consider what we needed done with that woman in the Chaplin film to be..." Ron waved a dismissive hand. "Chris, seriously?" The Time boss rolled his eyes. "Fine. Who, when, and where am I sending her?" Ron explained Alice's plight, and Chris pushed various buttons on the machine. "Just send back her present consciousness into her childhood self. That's it. You do realize that this might kill the woman. We've never reversed memory back into time before." He shrugged and scratched his nose, looking at a sleeping Alice on the screen in front of them. "Oomph. It's an experiment." Chris nodded, then cranked a few more dials. Adult Alice didn't move, but the child Alice on the adjacent screen. Ron cringed as the child screamed and screamed and screamed. Chris sucked in air through his teeth. Child Alice drew frightened looks from the other science museum patrons, until finally being subdued by her mother. Ron scratched his temple, chewed the inside of his cheek. The girl screeched, over and over again in her mother's arms. "What's the point?" Chris shut the machine off, locking adult Alice into her child body forever, or at least until the sun exploded. He clapped Ron on the shoulder. "Call that a success?" Ron was silent for a beat, then muttered, Seems like the quick death of the sun might be preferable to the existential crisis brought on by simply thinking about the slow death of it. Think she'll appreciate her life more this time around? Dunno. Sun's still going to explode on schedule. Board's not budging on it. He sighed. No one will remember her in the end, even if she does make something out of her life. Or maybe they will for a little while, now that she can change some things. That's all most of us can hope for, really. To not be insignificant. To do something important with our lives. He shot a triumphant smile at Chris, feeling overall very pleased with himself. At least he was able to do this. Change this small thing to help such a lovely planet. Chris shot him a confused look. Oh no, she can't change anything, man. She did all this screaming the first time around when she learned the sun was going to explode in 1 billion years too. I told you, nothing can be undone. But she will be able to watch it happen all over again with her adult memories and reasoning. Maybe she'll just learn to be grateful. Humans struggle with that. If you asked me, that's why deity's blowing him up. Ron paled, his grin evaporating. The time boss stretched his arms and cracked his back, and didn't notice the color drain from Ron's face. Anyway, let's get lunch. You're buying.